On a cold morning, a man was out walking his dog near Peterborough when he made a horrific and disturbing discovery. Dumped on the ground in a countryside ditch was the body of a man, dressed in women's clothes, who had been violently stabbed to death. This grim discovery would leave police shocked and baffled. However, detectives didn't know it at the time, but they were dealing with a serial killer that was on the loose. The police immediately launched an investigation that would soon lead them to the killer, a dangerous and violent monster who would enjoy killing for her own sick and twisted pleasure. This is the violent and disturbing case of Joanne Dennehy. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you may be in the world right now, hello, my name's Lloyd, and today you're watching When Evil Follows. Kathleen and Kevin Dennehy lived in Harpenden in Hertfordshire in the UK. They were happily in love with each other and would soon be the proud and loving parents of two baby girls, Joanna and Maria Dennehy. Joanna was born in the August of 1982, and then just 2 years later, younger sister Maria was born. Both babies were born healthy and happy, and the family unit was strong. They would do everything together, as you would expect a close-knit family to do. Both girls were raised with care and attention, and loved equally by both parents. Kathleen and Kevin worked exceptionally hard in order to provide for their daughters. The girls never went without the important fundamentals. They always had clean clothes to wear, and they always had food in their bellies, and they had nice toys. And both Joanna and Maria Dennehy were pretty much inseparable. Joanna and Maria were both your typical bubbly, friendly, kind, gentle, natured type of child. They both enjoyed singing and dancing around the house, and they loved movies and animals. The two sisters had this amazing closeness growing up, and they even invented their own special language, only used to communicate with each other when they were in trouble with their parents. Yeah, that sounds familiar to my own background. Aside from all family mischief, both Joanna and Maria were highly intelligent girls and did exceptionally well at school. Joanna was a bright student who was kind and gentle towards others, and she never struggled sociably in making friends. However, this childhood innocence would change entirely during her early teens. Joanna started underperforming in class and dropping out of school lessons, and her behaviour at school was becoming more and more disruptive. She became more argumentative with fellow classmates, including her teachers. Joanna would often refuse to go into class, and even began experimenting with drugs in school time. And by the age of 14 years old, Joanna actually set fire to her school books whilst being in the classroom, and she was finally expelled from school after numerous issues involving her maladjusted behaviour. And that's when she started to hang out with the wrong crowd. She started drinking lots of alcohol and smoking drugs, and then she formed an intimate relationship with a 21-year-old man. All of Joanna's actions and really bad decisions of being kicked out of school, drug taking, drinking, and now dating a 21-year-old man really concerned Joanna's parents, leading to continuous arguments in the home. And the more support and advice Joanna's parents offered, the more she would show serious attitude, with a disruptive temper, even breaking furniture within the family home. Eventually, Joanne Dennehy would meet someone new, an 18-year-old man called John Trenor, and she would soon enter into an intimate relationship with him. Bearing in mind, at this stage in Joanne Dennehy's life, she was still only 14 years old, nearing 15. However, the pair would quickly come to realise that they both had a lot of things in common, including general upset and disregard towards the rules of society. And Joanna clearly had a problem with authority and didn't like being told what to do. And so when nobody agreed with this mismatched relationship with John, they both decided to flee and run away and start a new life together, and that's exactly what they did. And for the first 2 years of their relationship was nothing but squatting and sleeping rough on the streets, even living behind a train station in a tent for 6 months before finally getting an apartment together. However, the relationship was a turbulent one, and the couple would often get drunk and smoke drugs, ending up having huge and vicious arguments with each other. And because Joanna's temper was so uncontrollable, she would often be the aggressor in the relationship, hitting out at John if she didn't get her own way. By the time Joanna Dennehy turned 16 years of age, she fell pregnant, and she immediately made the conscious decision to stop smoking, drinking, and doing drugs. In fact, during this 8-month period, Joanna took being pregnant very seriously. She ate the right foods, she looked after her health, and her whole demeanour had changed, and for the better. John realised the responsibilities of being a father, and he stuck around to support Joanna with her pregnancy, and he also wanted to be a part of the baby's life. However, the calm before the storm was shortly lived, because as soon as Joanna gave birth, she was back on the drink, and this time she was drinking more frequently and more heavily, leading to further and violent attacks and outbursts on towards John in front of Sian, their newborn baby. And by now, John was becoming more nervous around Joanna, especially when she was drinking. Joanna would also enjoy the company of other men, staying out all night and then sleeping through the day, all the while showing no attention to her child or partner. This one time Joanna got so drunk, she ran a bath with boiling, scalding hot water, and then went to put a baby girl in the bath, forgetting that the water was boiling hot. Somehow, call it intuition or just luck, John ran up the stairs in the nick of time and managed to get into the bathroom and stop Joanna from making this horrific mistake.
Lifting her into the bath, and I'd got in there to grab just before it happened because she filled the bath up, but she'd been drinking.
Didn't realise it was scalding hot water.
No, so that was another close shave. That's.
Joanna's constant drinking was a strain on the relationship. She had become much more violent towards John and refused to have any interaction with the baby. She never fed her, she wouldn't change her nappy, or play with her, pick her up, or talk to her. She absolutely did nothing as a mother. She was really rubbish. She was a crappy mum, and I know that's harsh, but she truly was. It was all John doing the parenting, while Joanna Dennehy would happily get drunk and then sleep all day. It was John who took all the responsibility of the baby, and to be fair, he was a really good dad. He would always make sure Sian was fed and clean, and get this, Joanne Dennehy would even refuse to push her own baby in a pram down the street in public. It was as if she was embarrassed of being seen doing something motherly or being seen doing something feminine, and that's really sad. Anyways, it was now the Easter weekend in the year of 2009, and Joanne Dennehy was completely intoxicated. That's when she launched into yet another unprovoked and physical attack at John, and after hitting him, she pulls out a kitchen knife from her pocket and stabs the floor, screaming, "I'm gonna kill someone." And that's when John had a reality check, realising the relationship couldn't be fixed. Feeling unsafe and concerned for the safety and welfare of his daughter, he knew he had to get away, and the very next day he packed some clothing for baby Sian, and they both went straight into hiding. They moved into a completely different town and found a perfect little house and set up home, raising his daughter Sian with patience and kindness. He got her into the perfect little school and gave her all the love and attention she needed, and they were both great together. Thing is, when Joanna woke up with a hangover the next day, she wasn't even the slightest bit bothered that both had gone. She didn't care at all, really. She continued drinking, and she was back into her drugs. She was partying hard with stray alcoholics and drug users and strange men she would lure in from the street. Joanna was pretty much partying hard and living and partying with no sense of logic. In fact, the drugs and alcohol had completely diminished any of her real senses or logical thinking, and her behaviour within the public would change as well. She was aggressive with others, constantly displaying antisocial behaviour whilst being out and about. She was finding herself in trouble more and more with law enforcement, racking up lots of drunken and disorderly charges, including antisocial behaviour charges. She was also arrested for drug dealing, drug use, being in possession of drugs, fighting, and being in control of a dangerous dog. Now, eventually, the police had enough of her disruptive behaviour and they thought, just let's get rid of her. And they decided to put her in prison for 12 months. Now, it was during this time in prison, Joanna Dennehy was made to see a mental health specialist. And soon enough, she was diagnosed with a series of disorders, including antisocial personality disorder and psychopathic personality disorder. Who would have guessed? Anyways, Joanne Dennehy was released after just serving 9 months inside, and almost immediately, her violent and erratic behaviour would begin. But this time her dangerous behaviour would be intensified, because now she was carrying around with her a large 7-inch blade tucked away inside her boot, all the while growing this distorted reputation around the local community, leading to many people being quite afraid of her. And despite her aggressive criminal reputation, in 2013, she managed to find accommodation in a small bedsit on the Byfield estate in Peterborough. However, as I mentioned, many people on the estate were quite fearful of Joanna Dennehy, and nobody would feel the fear more so than 56-year-old resident John Chapman. He was a Falkland War veteran who had sadly fallen upon hard times due to poor health and emotional trauma. John Chapman and Joanne Dennehy lived in the same building as they shared the same bedsit accommodation. They had separate rooms, but they still shared the kitchen and bathroom on the ground floor. And so when Dennehy moved in, harmless old boy John Chapman accidentally walked in the bathroom as Dennehy was naked because she didn't lock the door behind her or anything. So old boy Johnny starts freaking out saying, "Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you was in here." And because Joanna never locked the door behind her, of course anyone could have just walked in, right? So Dennehy starts screaming and shouting at the top of her lungs, "I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you." And of course Dennehy, being quite an intimidating character, made old boy John Chapman feel quite fearful within his own home. Everybody liked John Chapman. He was a harmless, kind and gentle soul, and there wasn't one person who he didn't tell just how scared he actually was of this woman who had just moved in. He just knew she was dangerous. He knew she was unpredictable, just call it intuition or streetwise, whatever, but he knew she was dangerous, and he really was fearing for his life, and he told all of his friends that.
You had me living in the end house there, you had Joe and John living there. That's Joe's bedroom up there. John used to come into the house and say things like, "Oh, there's a crazy woman moving in." And we say to him, "Do you want us to have a word with her?" And he would say, "No, leave it." Most of the time she wasn't there. But when she was there, you knew about it, that she was there. You know what I mean? You're like, "Oh, keep my mouth shut now."
She would often walk past him on the stairs and whisper to him, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to end you." And of course, John was petrified. And he was right to be, because it would be less than a week before Dennehy would turn her murderous fantasy into reality. The date is now the 19th of March 2013, and Joanne Dennehy is at one of the pubs in the local area, and it's there where she gets chatting to a 31-year-old man from Poland who moved to England in 2005. The man's name was Lucas Slaboskiewski, and after a couple of flirtatious drinks, she invites Lucas back to her place for a night of romance. And of course, being a single male, he accepts her offer and walks back with her hand in hand to Dennehy's apartment. And once both inside the property, they both sat down on the sofa and, without a moment's hesitation, she stabbed him through the chest with such force, she snapped his rib as the blade pierced straight through his body, killing him almost instantly. She then waited until it was quiet on the street, knowing that people are asleep in their beds, before dumping the body in a wheelie bin, where she leaves the body overnight outside her flat until the following morning, knowing full well she can't keep the body in the bin for much longer due to the smell, which is the first stage of decomposition. She quickly realises that she's going to need some extra help in disposing of the body, so Dennehy calls upon her old friend, 47-year-old Gary Richards, nickname Gary Stretch. Dennehy and Stretch were good friends from similar criminal social circles. Stretch was a really crappy failed burglar who enjoyed drugs and violence, and he would absolutely do anything for Dennehy because he wanted to bang bang with her. Can I say bang bang? Bang bang with her. Yeah, he was obsessed with her sexually and he loved her twisted and murderous charms. Dennehy would often make sexual advances towards Stretch, and in return he would do absolutely anything for her, always believing that one day Dennehy would be his girl for all of his hard work and efforts. And like I said, Stretch was also a failed burglar, most probably because he was too damn big to fit through any regular sized door, never mind any forced open window. 7'3". And so Stretch turns up in this adequately sized car, and as they're about to put the bin into the boot of the car, a young 14-year-old girl happens to be walking by as she's on her way to her nana's house for breakfast. And that's when Dennehy says to this young girl who's walking past, "Hey, I bet you can't guess what's inside this bin." The child responds back saying, "I don't know." And with that, Dennehy flips open the bin lid and, "Here, have a look at this." Shows the kid this dead body that's slumped inside the bin. And with that, the girl looks on in pure terror and then takes off down the street, but she never reported anything to the police. Not for the meantime, and from a child's perspective, she was thinking that could be me in the bin next time. And so this young girl carried on living her life as normal, knowing what she witnessed. Stretch then loads the bin into the back of the car, and they both then drive 10 miles east of Peterborough, heading towards the remote lands of Thorney Dyke. It's a quiet lane in the countryside that's hardly used by the public, and it was there, in a wide open deep ditch, where they dumped Lucas's dead body. And now Joanne Dennehy, feeling more confident than ever, with her lack of self-control rising and her desire for brutal violence growing, it would only be 9 days before Dennehy would be ready to kill again. Only this time around she homes in all of her murderous attention towards her shared accommodation resident and homely neighbour, 56-year-old Falkland Wars hero John Chapman. It's now the 29th of March in 2013 when Joanne Dennehy sneaks into John Chapman's ground floor bedroom and attacks him as he lays sleeping in his bed. She then climbs on top of him and sits on his lower legs. And as he lays there coughing and choking out on his own blood, she then stabs him in the chest 5 times, puncturing both of his lungs. She then stabbed him straight through his heart. She drove the knife into his body with such aggression, the blade actually snapped off in his breastbone. She sat up on top of John's body and watched the harmless man die, and enjoyed every single moment. Joanna Dennehy's murderous killings were now becoming more and more violent in nature, leading her sick and twisted confidence to grow at an alarming rate, and by now, she was only warming up. Joanna Dennehy's next victim would be a landlord, who was also her secret lover. 47-year-old landlord Kevin Lee. He was a married man, he had a mortgage, a beautiful wife, and young children at home, but all of that wasn't enough to stop him from falling sexually head over heels for this evil, unhinged and twisted killer. Just 1 hour after killing John Chapman, Joanne Dennehy sends a text message asking her landlord Kevin Lee, who was also her secret lover, to come around for some sexual activity. Within the hour of receiving the sexual demands by text message, the landlord Kevin Lee arrives at Joanne Dennehy's bedsit, the same property where Lucas was killed 10 days earlier, the same property where John Chapman is now laying dead in his bed next door. Kevin Lee walks into Dennehy's bedsit, and straight away he's greeted with open arms as Dennehy leads him into the bedroom as normal. She then tells Kevin to take off all of his clothes, and as her naked, unnerved secret lover lays on her bed, unaware of the immediate danger, Dennehy plunges a 7-inch knife straight into his chest. Confused, in shock and utter horror, and now in severe pain, Kevin desperately tries to defend himself. He's still able to use his arms to block the stabbing knife coming down on him, but Dennehy continues her frenzied attack by continuously bringing the knife down on him until she was sure he was dead. She then dressed his bloody body in a black sequined dress for her own sick and twisted entertainment. And once again she calls upon her old friend Gary Stretch to help her dispose of both bodies. But this time Gary Stretch brings along another friend of his called Leslie Layton. And yeah, this time they used the dead landlord's car to dispose of both bodies. They drove out to the same ditch in a remote area of Thorney Dyke, just miles away from where they dumped Lucas's dead body 10 days earlier. Both bodies were dumped in an open field ditch, with Kevin Lee's body still wearing a sequenced dress and left on all fours in a sexual position, no doubt as a last attempt to bring shame and humiliation to Kevin Lee, even in death. However, little did they know that it would be less than just 24 hours before one of the bodies would be discovered. Just the very next day, on the 30th of March in 2013, a dog walker was out walking his dog when he made a terrifying and horrific discovery, and that was the body of Kevin Lee. The dog walker immediately rang the authorities and reported the unsightly crime scene to the police. The police quickly identified the body as 48-year-old Kevin Lee. And just miles down the road from where the body was found, the police discovered a car that was completely destroyed and burnt out and left abandoned on the roadside. Detectives were quickly able to identify the make and model of the car, including the rightful ownership of the vehicle, and that was Kevin Lee. The Peterborough police contacted Christina Lee and gently informed her that they found Kevin's body along with his car that was burnt out, and that they were treating this case as a homicide. And as you can imagine, Christina and the children were completely devastated and saddened by this awful news. The police explained to Christina that they had to ask her a series of personal and important questions in relation to Kevin's private lifestyle, purely to help the police kickstart their investigations. They asked Christina things like, did Kevin have any enemies? Do you know who could have done this to him? Was he or wasn't he not a fair landlord? Did he have any troubled tenants? And that's when Christina remembered something unknowingly important. She told the police that one of the tenants had a history of threatening and violent behaviour towards other tenants that lived in the same property, owned by Kevin. The police asked Christina for the name of this troublesome tenant, and that's when the police were given the name Joanna Dennehy. And with that information, the police didn't waste any time and immediately sent police officers around to the property where Joanna Dennehy lived on the Byfield estate to ask her some questions. But when the police arrived at the property and knocked on the door, there was no answer. However, what the police did see pushed up against the garden fence was a bed mattress that was heavily stained in blood. The police informed Christina of the situation, and she quickly gave the police officers at the address full permission to break down the door and enter the property, and that's exactly what they did. Officers eventually walked into the bedsit, and there wasn't any obvious signs of trouble, although the police officers could immediately sense that something was wrong, because there was an overbearing smell of bleach, and they also found small blood drops on the floor. The police officers at the property were now starting to suspect that Joanne Dennehy was without doubt a key person of interest in Kevin's murder, and they really were desperate to talk to her as soon as possible. The police began running some enhanced background checks on Dennehy, and after discovering her long and extensive history of crime and her violent nature, the police strongly believed that she was definitely more than capable of the worst case scenario. Christina Lee gave the police Joanna Dennehy's phone number, and they immediately began using GPS technology in tracking her phone. The signal clearly shows that Dennehy's phone did ping from the same location as to where the police found Kevin's burnt out car. And with that, the police finally had their first solid link in connecting Dennehy with the murder of Kevin Lee. And police officers also knew that they needed to track her down as soon and as quickly as possible. The police officers using this GPS technology managed to locate a second telephone number that was also located at the scene of the crime, and that was 36-year-old Leslie Layton. He was quickly apprehended at his home address and was arrested under suspicion of murder. This guy at first was trying to make out that he didn't know anything about anything, and he actually told the police that he didn't even know anybody by the name of Joanne Dennehy. He actually sat in the police interrogation interview telling the police that he knew nothing about any murder. But yeah, innocent Leslie Layton couldn't exactly explain to detectives how or why his phone was signalled at the scene of the crime. He eventually cracked and agreed to tell the police absolutely everything in order to get a lighter sentence. Leslie Layton informed detectives that Dennehy had an accomplice with her, Gary Stretch, and that they were both on the run together, heading west in a dark Ford Mondeo. And not before long, every police enforcement agency throughout the country was out on the hunt looking for these deluded and seriously dangerous individuals. Meanwhile, Dennehy and Stretch both travelled onwards towards Norfolk in an attempt to evade capture. And once they arrived in Norfolk, they committed a series of home burglaries, looking to steal anything of any value so they could sell it for cash to help fund their getaway from being caught. And once they were all done from breaking into people's homes and stealing as much as they could from innocent and retired old people, the two scumbags would put the next part of their shitty plan into action. Dennehy and Stretch decided that they're going to need extra help selling their goods in order to turn it into cash, and so they both paid a visit to Mark Lloyd. Mark Lloyd was just one of the many people Stretch knew from being inside prison. They shared a cell together once and they really hit it off. But bear in mind, Mark Lloyd hasn't seen or spoken to Stretch in years. In fact, Mark Lloyd has spent the last 4 years of his life keeping his nose clean, living a law-abiding life. And he was done with crime. He was done being involved with criminal activity. And now he just wanted a quiet life. And so when he saw Dennehy and Stretch banging on his front and back door, he was quite surprised, and not in a good way. And eventually, after knocking and knocking, they just walked into Mark's property and asked him if they could stay at his place. They both explained that they were on the run and that they needed Mark to sell their stolen goods as they were desperate and they needed cash. So Mark starts telling them both that he lives a legit life and he's gone straight and that he doesn't want anything to do with their stolen goods. In fact, he doesn't want anything to do with them. He doesn't want anything to do with Stretch or Dennehy. Sensing the rejection, Joanna Dennehy then pulls out a knife and looks at Mark straight in the eyes, and she says to him, "I've already killed 3 people so far. Do you want me to prove it?"
Joanne's got right in front of me, pulled the knife out of her bra and said, "You know Gary, he's the taxi driver, he dumps the bodies. I go around killing people." I was terrified. I had to convince her that I was on her side, because I think she would have killed me without hesitation.
And it really was from that moment onwards, Mark Lloyd is thinking to himself, I've got to go with the flow here, and I don't want to provoke any trouble. And so effectively Mark Lloyd is now a hostage in their company, and that for him is quite a tricky and somewhat dangerous situation to be in. And so Mark Lloyd agrees to help them both, and he tells them that he's got contacts that would be more than willing to buy these stolen goods for cash. And although Mark Lloyd may not understand at this stage just how dangerous these two are, but the one thing is for sure, and that is agreeing to help them both, Mark Lloyd has just saved his own life. It's now April the 2nd, 2013, and just 4 days after the killing of John Chapman and Kevin Lee. And by now, the police have already made numerous public appeals on live TV, so you would think keeping a low profile would be key. Right? Wrong. Dennehy and Stretch, and now Mark, all set off in the car to meet Mark's criminal contacts in an effort to sell their stolen goods. They then stop off at a local off-licensed store where Joanna Dennehy and Mark Lloyd enter the store to buy some vodka and cigarettes. Because that's what people do when they're on the run, right? You've got to get your priorities in order. The CCTV footage clearly shows Dennehy cuddling Mark inside the shop. But hold on for a second, because there's something much more dark and sinister about this footage. What you're actually seeing is footage of Joanne Dennehy pressing a knife against Mark's back, as a gentle reminder, just to let Mark know who's in control here. They both return back to the car with cigarettes and alcohol, and before the car even pulls out the car park, Dennehy has drunk a quarter of the bottle of vodka, and she is now primed and ready to kill again. She turns the radio volume up in the car and starts screaming out to Stretch, "I'm in a good mood again, and I'm feeling it. I'm ready. I'm ready to kill again. I need to kill someone." And with that, Stretch drives past this old man who was minding his own business walking his dog. Stretch then points out to the man and he says, "Will he do?" To which Joanna Dennehy replies, yes, yeah, he's perfect. Now, the man walking his dog was 64-year-old Robin Barrister, a local retired firefighter, known and loved by all in his community. Robin was a friendly man who spent most of his professional career saving lives and helping other people. And at 3:40 in the afternoon, in broad daylight, on a public street with many people driving past, Joanna Dennehy launches into an attack. She runs up behind the man and immediately starts plunging the knife into his back, over and over again, until he eventually falls to the ground, landing on his side. He looks right at Dennehy. He looks her in the eyes and he shouts out, "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" Dennehy replies, "Oh, because I can. And oh, look, you're bleeding. It's probably best I kill you now." And with that, she continues her vicious and violent assault. All the while, people are driving past, witnessing this unprovoked violence and beeping their horns, shouting out the window, "Leave him alone! Leave him alone!" And Dennehy at this point was completely unfazed and actually started waving back and smiling at the traffic as she continued stabbing Robin to death. And after bringing the blade down on the poor man over and over again, she runs back to the car and screams out the window to the man who's laying on the floor in a pool of his own blood, "Ha ha, I got you, I got you." And with that, the car quickly pulls off. She then tells Stretch to find her someone else to kill. And while all this is happening, Mark Lloyd is sat watching from the back seat of the car in pure disbelief and fear, while at the same time trying to make out that he wasn't fazed by what he just witnessed. And less than 2 miles down the same road from the last attack, Stretch then points out another male dog walker who was minding his own business. And once again, Dennehy tells Stretch to pull over, and she jumps out of the car and launches into yet another brutal and violent attack. This next victim was a 56-year-old man named John Rogers, who was a much-loved family man from the Hereford area. He was also attacked from behind and stabbed in the back continuously. And as the man lay there bleeding on the floor, she looked at the man in the eyes and licked his blood off her knife blade, as John looked on in pure horror. John Rogers was stabbed in the neck, chest, back and arms. And as the man lay on the ground, bleeding out heavily, she then carries the man's dog back to the car with her, and they drive away, stealing his dog. Both men were stabbed over 16 times, and unbelievably both men survived the attack, and even gave the police an accurate description of Dennehy and her facial tattoo and her getaway car. The police were still tracking Dennehy's phone's GPS, and now with an accurate description of the getaway vehicle and a confirmed location of the area thanks to public CCTV footage and eyewitness accounts, it was now just a matter of time before the police would move in on the pair. The activity of the police in the area could only be described as somebody who's kicked over a bee's nest. There were police cars racing up and down the street with sirens and blue lights flashing after many people from the public reported these knife attacks. The police had the car registration, and they also had the colour of the car and a calculated location of a 10 by 10 mile radius. But the real question the police were asking was how many more people would Dennehy attack until she was captured and arrested. An hour or so later, a police officer was driving an unmarked police car through the Norton Close Council estate in Hereford when he spotted 7-foot-tall Stretch with Joanne Dennehy and the stolen dog. The officer immediately called for backup, with Dennehy completely unaware that she was being tracked by police. And just moments later, police units arrived at Norton Close, with Gary Stretch and Mark Lloyd stood at the front door of this associate's house, trying to negotiate a good deal for the stolen items, with Joanne Dennehy sat in the back seat of the car playing with the dog. The police immediately recognised Dennehy and arrested her right there and then on the spot, along with Mark Lloyd, who was now walking back towards the car. But Gary Stretch saw what was happening, and he went on the run, jumping gardens until he was eventually found and arrested soon after. Gary Stretch was then placed into a police van, and as he was stepping inside the van, he said to the arresting officer, "Damn, you caught us. Me and Joanna would have been the next Bonnie and Clyde." Yeah, that's exactly what he said. What a loser. Joanne Dennehy, on the other hand, she was taken to the police station, where she was charged with suspicion of murder and 2 attempted murders. And just 90 minutes after stabbing these 2 men, leaving them for dead, here she is in the police station laughing and flirting with arresting police officers, and completely carefree of her heinous crimes that she's committed.
I love your eyebrows. Thanks. Arresting
Your decent cover. This is amazing.
Looks good.
Thanks, Matt. That makes me feel so good. Real sexy.
The following day, on April the 3rd in 2013, the bodies of Lucas Slavagaski and John Chapman were both discovered just outside of Peterborough in the rural farmlands by the landowner, though forensics were still able to match the blood-stained mattress found by the police in the front garden of Joanna Dennehy's rented property to her 3 victims. Dennehy's pre-trial hearing was set for the 18th of November in 2013 at the Old Bailey in London. She showed no remorse for her actions and was laughing all the way through the proceedings. Gary Stretch also took to the stand in the Old Bailey, pleading his innocence, claiming that he was manipulated by Dennehy all the way through the killing spree, and that he had no idea that she was going to kill any of the people involved. However, after the high-class jury heard the gruesome details in the way he disposed of each of the bodies, and helped Dennehy cover up the killings, and pointed out victims for Dennehy's violent gratification, Gary Stretch was quickly sentenced to serve 25 years behind bars, with the minimum of 19 years to serve. Leslie Layton was also found guilty for helping dispose of the bodies. He was given a slightly lighter sentence for being a police informant, and was sentenced to serve a minimum of 14 years behind bars. Mark Lloyd was found to be innocent, and simply another one of Dennehy's victims. He was acquitted from all charges and was given extra support to help him through the whole ordeal. Fast forward just 3 months, and the date is now the 28th of February in the year of 2014. Dennehy pleaded guilty to all her crimes in hope for a lighter sentence. However, Judge Spencer, along with the high-class jury, agreed that Dennehy would always be a danger to society. And on the 28th of February in 2014, Joanna Dennehy was charged with 3 counts of murder and 2 attempted murders, and was finally sentenced to serve a whole life term. The 3rd woman in British history to directly receive the highest custodial sentence in a courtroom, next to Myra Hindley for the Moore murders and Rose West. Joanne Dennehy was immediately sent to the Bronzefield prison, where she will never be released. Joanne Dennehy remains to be the most dangerous woman in the criminal justice system today. After Joanna Dennehy was sent to prison, the police released this public statement saying, "Joanne Dennehy is the most dangerous woman in the criminal justice system today. She has no emotions and does not consider the consequences for her evil actions. Her behaviour is not in any way erratic. It's totally calculated. And even her own mother and sister and daughter have publicly said, the world is a much safer and better place without Joanna in it. She's evil and a disgrace and will never be a part of our family." And even in prison, Joanna continues to be disruptive and a complete nuisance in prison. Joanna Dennehy was planning her escape when a prison officer found her diary. In the diary, she planned to kill the prison officer, then cut off his fingers to use on the electric finger pad scanners. And when her plan was foiled, she was given 3 years in solitary confinement. And once she got out from solitary confinement, she tried to sue the prison by claiming the prison had wrongfully taken away her human rights. How dumb is that? She's a cold-blooded killer who's killed 3 people and tried to kill 2 men, and she wants to talk about human rights? It's a joke. Joanna Dennehy continues to spend the rest of her life behind bars, no doubt causing trouble and trauma for anyone who has to deal with her. And with all that being said, bloody well keep her in there.
I was walking the dog towards a cycle path just down there. And I suddenly felt what I thought was a really heavy punch in the small of my back. I saw this woman and she just kept stabbing me in the chest. And she also said, "Oh look, you're bleeding, I'd better do some more." I just thought, well, this is it. I'm going to die.
Police believe you were stabbed more than 30 times. They had to stop counting after that.
It was about 40 in all, I think. I just thought, well, this is it. I'm going to die.
Hello there, and thank you for watching another episode of When Evil Follows. Can I ask you all please to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We upload true crime horror, both solved and unsolved, right here on this channel every single week. So please, hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell. That way you'll get notifications every time we upload a video. Do you think Joanna Dennehy should be allowed out in the public after 20 odd years? Or do you think she would be a constant threat to society? And fancy going on the run with someone who's 7 foot 3 inches tall. What a circus! And with that being said, do stay safe, look after yourself, and I'll see you again the next time when evil follows. Bye.